What if a whisper barely louder than breath could rewrite the rules of diplomacy? What if a single moment of unspoken connection between a human and an alien risked unraveling peace across galaxies? He didn't mean to propose. She wasn't supposed to hear it, but the stars did, and they remembered. Asterisk glowing plants reacting to touch, a sculpture cracking under pressure, and two hands reaching for each other across light. Asterisk, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Earth, or somewhere farther. Nolan Breyer stood alone on the midnight deck of the relay ship Sonderlight, breathing metal-thin air scented with cinnamon and ozone. In minutes, he would land on Valmera, a world where people spoke with music and plants judged feelings. Promotion. They told him, yet his stomach pitched like a shuttle in crosswind. The ship's artificial intelligence chimed, docking in 2 minutes. Please rehearse greeting phrase Beta 5. Nolan repeated the 5 calm syllables he had practiced, but a nervous laugh bent the last tone upward. He winced. Great, he thought. I'll greet a diplomat the way tourists ask for the restroom. The doors parted. Warm night washed over him. The docking court looked more garden than terminal. Stone tiles glowed with gentle light, and floating lanterns drifted overhead like lazy fireflies. Far above, rings of faint aurora shimmered like veils. Nolan scanned. The path, heart-rattling dot she arrived without fanfare. Keleth Mirren, liaison of the Valmerian Harmonic Council, moved as if gravity admired her. Tall, robed in layers of blue that shimmered like water, she stopped 3 paces away. Her long, ridged ears angled toward him, ever listening. When she breathed, tiny chimes on her sleeve sang, marking the tempo of her call. Nolan lifted a hand. In hello, Keleth placed her right palm over her heart and swept an arc through the air. Trying to copy her, he swung too wide and almost slapped the lantern. It bobbed back, offended. A tiny smile softened Keleth's composed face. I am Keleth Mirren, she said in precise galactic common. You are Nolan Breyer? Nolan confirmed and delivered his greeting. The bent tone transformed polite welcome into something closer, to affectionate compliment. The lanterns brightened, reacting to Keleth's surprised delight. Did I mispronounce? He asked. You spoke warmly, she replied, like praising a first blossom tea. So much for protocol. Before he could apologize, deep drums rolled, and dancers with ribboned poles began the arrival ritual. Manuals said visitors should stay still, while hosts circled, guiding rhythm. Manuals did not mention ribbons, slashing close enough to trim hair. Instinct shouted danger. Nolan dropped into a defensive crouch he'd learned in zero-G self-defense. The lead dancer halted. Silence pooled. Keleth touched his arm, light but steady. It is display, not duel, she whispered. Up close, her voice carried 2 notes. One spoken, one sung below hearing. Heat flushed his cheeks. He straightened, muttered an apology in 3 languages, and the dance resumed, though tighter now. When it ended, the dancers offered polite bows, yet uncertainty lingered like aftertaste. Keleth guided him toward the residential spire. As they walked, she demonstrated how Valmerians shift foot pressure to signal mood, turning each step into soft percussion. Nolan tried and earned an approving nod. Little victories mattered, he told himself. The path wound through a garden of singing vines. Each step released soft notes, a living welcome. Nolan asked, do the vines choose the melody? They echo pulse and breath, Keleth said. Walk with fear, they hiss. Walk with wonder, they rise. She glanced at him. The vines produced a playful trill. Tonight they hear both in you. How do you hear? He ventured. She tapped. The base of her left ear ridge. I sense waves humans do not, whispers, heartbeats, the scrape of secret thoughts. She smiled slightly, useful, sometimes alarming. They reached a veranda overlooking a lagoon, lit by bioluminescent fish. Stars hung huge overhead, bright enough to feel close. Wonder untied the knot in Nolan's chest. Terror followed wonder. But softer now. Kelleth lingered beside him. Rest will steady your tone, he smiled. Is my tone that bad? Only uncertain. Uncertainty is music without key. She set a tiny shell on the railing. It glowed, recording ambient harmony. For later study, wind lifted stray hair across his eyes. He brushed it back. Believing she had turned away, he let words slip, barely louder than breath. I hope I don't ruin this. He meant the mission, the fragile piece, his own future. Yet watching her silhouette framed by lantern light, he also meant something. Unnamed. Relief bloomed, thinking the confession lost tonight. Kelleth spoke without turning. Many songs begin with a trembling note, Nolan Breyer. His pulse skipped. Of course she heard. Her ears could catch a moth's sigh. She looked over her shoulder then, violet eyes reflecting starlight. Let us see if we can tune the next notes together. Behind them, the vines hummed a low, approving chord. From the lagoon, a fish leaped, scattering shards of light, like sparks. Nolan felt the first flicker of impossible harmony, flare quiet, delicate, astonishingly bright among the stars. For the first time since receiving his orders, he welcomed the unknown. Whatever awaited, he sensed the melody would be worth learning. Nolan woke before dawn, heart knocking fast, an echo of a dream in which he and Kelleth stood inside a crystal hall that sang their names. The dream felt half prophecy, half prank. He dressed in the thin, silver study robe required for laboratory work and crossed the sky bridge to Valmera's Resonance Institute. Soft green mist floated over the gardens below, and each step on the glass path chimed a different pitch, like walking across a sleeping harp. He tried to match the notes to a scale, but gave up. The bridge seemed to know only improvisation. Inside the lab, Kelleth waited beside a sphere of liquid light, the harmonic resonator. She greeted him with a nod and placed a small stone on her palm. This crystal listens to intent, she said in her calm music voice. If two minds align, it glows in their shared color. Nolan remembered his bent greeting tone and felt sweat collect at his temples. He cleared his throat and told her he was ready to begin, though his own voice disagreed, cracking twice on the word ready. They stood across from each other, fingertips on the resonator's cool surface. He thought of blank paper, of starting lines in perfect black ink. She thought he guessed of patience, maybe of sunrise sliding through tall windows. The sphere brightened to a gentle amber, and the floor vines stirred like dreaming cats. Kelleth's ears dipped in approval. A clear balance, she murmured. Excitement flared in Nolan's chest. Then a memory struck of embassy manuals warning that overfamiliar spiritual alignment may be interpreted as pre-bonding. He stepped back, almost tripped, and the amber faded to dull gray. The vines fell quiet with a sigh. For the next hour, they measured voice patterns, pulse beats, and breath lengths, feeding the data into the Institute's hollow wall. Lines of color rose and fell in time. At first, his rhythm bumped against hers, like clumsy dance partners. But he tried to copy her steady breathing and felt her slow to meet him halfway. The lines merged and rose together until the wall burst into a spray of gold motes. A row of experimental seedlings on the shelf answered by glowing bright blue. One even unfolded its leaves, although no sun lamp was active. Kelleth's eyes widened. They sensed our phase match, she whispered, half wonder, half scientific delight. Nolan grinned, forgetting every protocol, except that shared joy felt right. The afternoon brought a visitor. Envoy Marcus Hall, from Earth's Central Council, pressed into a rigid Navy uniform. He carried the smell of recycled ship air and urgency. His eyes flicked from the blue-lit seedlings to the still bright resonator and finally settled on Nolan with thin disapproval. "Dr. Breyer, a word?" They stepped outside. Heil spoke quietly, but each syllable cracked like thin ice. "Our alliances are delicate. The treaty draft forbids deep emotional coupling during negotiation. Appearances, Doctor. If people see colors blooming when you share a room, they'll imagine marriage contracts before trade deals." Nolan bristled. "We're researchers, performing assigned tests." Hale's brows rose. "Then keep them strictly clinical. Council wants a daily report, signed by both parties, describing all contact." He handed over a data slate and left without another word. Nolan's stomach twisted. He returned to the lab expecting anger from Kelleth, but she only tilted her head as if witnessing fog try to be a wall. He explained Hale's demand. She listened, eyes thoughtful rather than offended. "Valmira values honest motive over silent rules," she said. "Still, I do not wish to pull you into scandal." Nolan's laugh came sharp, surprising both. "Of them? Scandal? I'm an awkward researcher who once confused a salute for a sneeze. The council worries about power, not people." She considered, then tapped the resonator. "Power changes shape when people share meaning." That night, Nolan wandered the guest quarters, mind whirring. Each window showed a different angle of the planet's famous twin moons. They called to him like giant question marks. At last he returned to the lab, empty now, but humming faintly. He placed his palm on the resonator. It stayed dark, reflecting. Only his worried face. He whispered, "I don't want to pull her down." The sphere remained still. When he removed his hand, a delayed spark flickered soft violet, the color of unresolved chords. He left, no calmer, but somehow determined. Morning delivered a fresh surprise. A printed dream log slid under his door. Valmerian courtesy, according to the note. While the Institute studied resonance, some side projects monitored predictive dream spill. Nolan skimmed the pages and felt his pulse race. He had recorded no dreams, yet the log described a scene of him and Kelleth guiding a glowing sculpture into the sky, watched by cheering crowds. The signature at the bottom belonged to neither of them. It was the Institute's psychic archivist, verifying authenticity. Coincidence or omen, he could not tell. In the hallway, he nearly collided with Kelleth. Her robe today was a calm gray, but threads of silver pulsed at the hems. She sensed his tension immediately and angled her ears to soften his mood. "Walk with me," she said. They took a garden path where floating petals drifted like lazy snow. Nolan handed her the dream log. She read quickly, a smile ghosting. "Our subconscious builds bridges faster than Council's draft laws," she mused. He looked at her, truly looked, noting the steady strength behind her composed face. "I don't want my government to shut those bridges." A breeze carried his words to her ears even before he finished. She nodded once. "Come tonight," she said, "to the amphitheater of echoes. The unity ceremony begins at moonrise. We will attend as research partners, if that feels safe. But know this, our harmony already sings. Paper cannot unwrite it." Nolan hesitated, thinking of Envoy Hale's cold warning and the glowing seedlings that did not care about treaties. "What happens at a unity ceremony?" he asked. "We place our frequencies into a shared song," she answered, voice low. 3 strains begin separate, shifting closer until they rest on the same note. Those present hear the final chord and decide whether it should survive. He swallowed. "Is there a chance the chord will fail?" She smiled gently. "Almost always. That is why the moment matters." Evening arrived, painted in violet and silver. Nolan dressed in the plain robe issued on his first day. but tucked a small earth seashell into the pocket something that once carried ocean music. As the moons climbed, he walked toward the amphitheater, lights dancing on the path ahead. Each step felt like choosing a note in a melody not yet written. All around, the night vines hummed, halfway between yes and no, suspense hanging like breath before a first kiss. Nolan entered the wide circle of stone and saw Cullith waiting under a ring of soft lanterns. A ceremony drum gave a single beat deep, echoing, eternal, and the resonance of almost began. Nolan entered the stone circle as the second moon crested the ridge, its pale light painting soft rings across the amphitheater floor. A hush settled over the gathering. Galmerian elders lined the outer arc, robes fluttering like slow wings. Earth delegates watched from a raised balcony, datapads ready, every expression set to neutral. In the center, Kellith waited beside a low pedestal that held 3 slender crystal rods. Their tips glowed faintly, like coals that had almost forgotten fire. A single drumbeat signaled the start. Kellith lifted the first rod and set it upright between them. Then she gestured for Nolan to place the second. His hand shook, but when his fingers brushed cool crystal, he imagined the gentle surf of his childhood shore and felt steadier. The rod locked into a narrow slot. A soft hum rose, neither loud nor melodic, simply present, an empty page waiting for ink. The third rod hovered in Kellith's palm. Tradition said the final piece could be set only when both hearts found the same pace. They faced each other, eyes locked. He breathed in, thinking of her calm voice reading field notes. She exhaled, remembering his shy joke about vines as composers. Their chests lifted and fell until breaths matched. The amphitheater vines responded first, releasing a single silver seed that drifted upward like a tiny lamplight. Under that glow, Kellith slid the last rod into place. Light flared. The 3 crystals fused into a single spiral, thickening and rising until it towered above them, a living sculpture of glass and radiance. Colors flowed inside: teal, gold, violet, shifting in waves that mirrored their joined pulse. The crowd murmured. Cameras clicked. In the visitors' gallery, Envoy Marcus Halle leaned forward, thin mouth tightening. Nolan glimpsed him and understood at once that this beauty could be read as a breach. The sculpture kept growing, fed by their silent accord. It sent thin threads outward, weaving patterns in the air, loops and curves that formed symbols of welcome. Trust, belonging. Nolan's breath caught. It was as if a hidden part of his mind poured itself into visible form. Kellith's eyes shimmered with tears she did not let fall, and a sharp chime cut through. Earth security drones, dull gray and angular, descended like iron sparrows. Hale's voice echoed from a projection node. Enough. Terminate the resonance now. The drones angled beams toward the sculpture. Kellith stepped forward, blocking the nearest light. This ceremony is recognized by interplanetary code, she said, voice even. You break it at risk of sanction. Halle answered, we protect. Diplomatic balance. Personal entanglement jeopardizes the accord. Nolan felt heat climb his spine. He turned to the gallery. The accord claims to honor understanding. Are we proving understanding or fear? Hale's gaze narrowed. Fear keeps empires from burning, Doctor. A second drone advanced, humming as it prepared to damp the harmonic field. The sculpture dimmed. Where color had flowed, dull cracks spread like frost across glass. Something inside Nolan rebelled. He moved past Kellith and placed his palm on the weakening spiral. Pain flared, cold and bright, but he held. Listen, he whispered to the drones, the delegates, the vines, the moons, anyone. This shape is only dangerous if meaning itself is dangerous. Kellith joined him, her hand covering his. A warm pulse rolled outward, cracks sealed. Light returned, not blinding but calm, steady as sunrise. The lead Valmerian elder raised a hand, halting the drones. "We will convene the tribunal of shared truths," she announced. "Let testimony decide." Hale hesitated, then nodded stiffly. The drones withdrew. The sculpture settled into gentle luminescence, like a torch kept for later journey. After the circle emptied, Nolan and Caliph sat alone on the mosaic floor. Exhaustion tugged at them, but neither wanted to move. "I counted 12 cracks," he said softly. "I felt each one," she replied. Her voice wavered, the smallest quiver he had heard from her yet. He reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'm sorry the ceremony became a battleground." She shook her head. "The risk was always part of the song. Only the melody changes." Footsteps approached, elder fairies, her face lined by years of diplomacy. She knelt so her long ears swept the tiles. "The tribunal convenes at dawn," she told them. "It will accept narrative defense. Speak with honesty, and the law must listen." She placed a smooth quartz disc in Nolan's palm. Tiny symbols glowed across its surface, permission to address the council. "But know that honesty cuts both ways," she added, eyes gentle. "Unspoken fears will echo loudest." Later, in the quiet of his quarters, Nolan turned the disc over and over. Words tangled in his mind, research notes, childhood anecdotes, half-formed poems. Nothing seemed weighty enough to carry the truth without sinking it. He opened the room's windowsill, letting night air curl around his shoulders. Down below, the half-finished sculpture still glimmered in the garden, watched by patient vines. Soft knock. Caliph entered, carrying a small wooden box. "Our archives store memories as tone fragments," she said, opening the lid. Inside lay thin shards of crystal, each etched with swirling rings. "Choose one," she urged. Nolan selected a shard no bigger than his thumbnail. She fitted it into a reader, and gentle music filled the room. Children laughing across water. Distant thunder, a heartbeat steady and calm. "This was captured the day my people agreed to share our skies with off-world travelers," she explained. Hope sounded like this. She met his gaze. "Truth must sound like something too. What does yours sound like?" Nolan listened till the final note faded. The silence afterward felt alive, waiting. "Mine sounds like the space between a question and an answer," he said at last. He held the comfort of that pause, let it steady him. Then he looked at Caliph. "Will you stand beside me tomorrow?" Her smile returned, small but sure. "We began the chord together. We finish it together." Dawn crept over Valmera in hues of rose and silver. The tribunal hall loomed ahead, arches carved with histories of long-settled conflicts. Nolan and Caliph walked side by side, palms almost but not quite touching, the echo of everything unsaid, humming between them. Each unsaid word was a footprint, guiding them forward. Somewhere behind the thick doors, elders waited, laws waited, Envoy Hale waited, even fear waited. Nolan inhaled, tasting cool citrus in the air. The day felt like that first blank page, again frightening, but full of room to write. He squeezed the quartz disc. Together they stepped inside, ready to let their story speak in tones no decree could silence. Asterisk, a crystal bell rang through the tribunal hall, and silence spread like dawnlight across a still lake. Elders of many worlds floated, stood, or perched upon the tiered seats, some wrapped in silks, others in polished shells, each face watching the two figures at the center circle. Nolan Breyer felt the smooth quartz disc warming in his palm. Permission to speak had never weighed so much. Beside him, Caliph Mirren breathed a calm rhythm, her shoulders rising and falling like gentle tide. They had agreed. He would tell the story, she would show it. Words and movement would become one vow. Nolan stepped forward. His voice trembled on the first syllable, but he did not hide it. "This began," he said, with misunderstanding my bent tone, her careful smile, "a dance I thought was danger." Laughter rippled through a few delegates. He welcomed it. Yet each mistake became a note in a larger song. We discovered our pulses could guide plants, our breaths could heal cracked glass. That harmony scared people who measure power, but not wonder. He glanced up at Envoy Marcus Hall, whose stern expression faltered under so many listening eyes. Nolan continued, telling how drones tried to dim a sculpture of light, how cracks spread until joined hands sealed them. "You fear attachment. We'll tilt treaties," he finished, voice steady now. "But treaties are only promises. What we found is proof a promise can be lived, not just signed." He stepped back. Kelleth lifted her arms, and tiny spheres spilled from her sleeve's memory. Seeds. At her soft whistle, they rose into the air, glowing threads linking one to another until they formed a web of living images. A child on a shore chasing gulls, Nolan's first memory. A young Kelleth touching a wounded skybird, singing it calm. Threads merged, lanterns drifting over a Valmerian garden. The broken widening song of the resonant sculpture, two silhouettes beneath twin moons. The hall dimmed so the light of memory shone brighter. Delegates leaned forward, caught in the gentle orbit of stories made visible. When the last seed faded, Kelleth spoke in clear galactic common, each word a quiet drumbeat. "I stand before you not as temptation, but as testimony. Connection is not contamination, it is expansion. Where our notes overlap, new chords appear. Will you silence a song because it is new?" Her ears angled toward the elders, daring them to answer. Elder Theres, chair of the tribunal, floated above the circle, ribbons of authority trailing behind. "The council will recess for reflection," she intoned. A hush followed, yet tension loosened. Many had already heard the verdict written in their own quickened heartbeats. Nolan and Kelleth waited in a side chamber that smelled of parchment and fresh rain. He exhaled, feeling weight drain from his limbs. Kelleth studied his face. "Whatever they decide, the vow lives in us," she whispered. Nolan smiled. "Still, I would like the universe to nod yes." Minutes later, Theres returned, eyes bright. "By unanimous vote, the treaty clause shall be amended. Emotional union formed in respect is not forbidden, but protected." She pressed two slim strips of woven light into their hands. "Official blessing. Let the vow you carry inspire those who listen poorly." News spread faster than stardust on solar wind. Valmerian streets filled with soft bells and ribbon banners. Earth delegates, caught off guard, found themselves shaking hands with strangers who were suddenly allies in celebration. Hale approached Nolan. For a breath Nolan expected reprimand, but the envoy only sighed. "History travels odd paths," he said. "Perhaps yours will guide ours." It sounded like the closest thing to apology Hale could manage. A week later, the wedding unfolded on a high terrace overlooking luminous seas. Simplicity had been promised. Valmerian simplicity meant 7 rites instead of 70. At dusk, guests gathered around a hovering loop of silver wood, the union ring. Vines bloomed along the railings, their petals echoing quiet chords. Earth musicians strummed string instruments, tuned to match Valmerian harmonic scales. The resulting melody felt both familiar and dreamlike. Nolan wore a spine-lined jacket that adjusted color with his breath, all nervous blush and ocean calm. Kelleth's robe shimmered from twilight blue to dawn rose, mapping the shifting sky. They stood beneath the union ring as Elder Theres recited a single line: "Choose and choose again." The rite required them to speak their promises twice, first as individuals, then as a pair. Nolan turned to Keleth. I choose to translate silence, to make space for your songs, and to laugh when meaning wobbles. His throat tightened. He breathed the promise once more, and the jacket deepened to steadfast green. Keleth touched her own chest. I choose to ask bold questions, to stand where fear cracks glass, and to soften the sharp edges of every unknown. She repeated the words, and her robe sparkled like sunrise meeting sea. Together, they placed their palms on a small orb of fused starlight. It brightened, registering joint intent. We choose to share unfinished notes, they said in unison. Voices weaving. The orb lifted, drifted upward, and split into countless motes that scattered across the darkening sky. Each became a pinpoint star, temporary but brilliant, spelling an unwritten constellation. Guests gasped. Even Nolan's hardened. Instructor from the academy wiped a tear. The final rite was the sky glide brief weightlessness granted by low-grav fields. Nolan and Keleth stepped onto the invisible lift, rose above the terrace, and drifted among floating petals. Down below, friends and skeptics alike tilted heads to watch. Nolan whispered, only for her. All those nights I feared words would break things. But they built this. Keleth's laughter chimed like soft bells. Some whispers are blueprints, she replied. They touched foreheads, and the field carried them in a slow arch across the stars. An ever-curious vine launched a single silver seed after them, caught in their slipstream, twirling like confetti. Later, under lanterns now dim for rest, the newly joined pair found a quiet balcony. The noise of joyful crowds faded to distant murmur. Nolan traced a finger along the rail's smooth curve. Tell me, he said, voice gentle, what do we build next? Keleth leaned close, eyes reflecting both moons. Not build, she corrected softly, compose. She pointed upward. The temporary constellation still shimmered, slowly dissolving into ordinary night. Every day another note, she added, until the sky hums our story. Nolan followed her gaze and felt the vast silence of space no longer empty, but alive with possible chords. He exhaled a quiet laugh, smoothing a stray hair behind her ear. Then let's compose sunrise, he said. And with the vow now written in stardust ratified by hearts, witnessed by worlds, they stepped back into the circle of lantern light, ready to begin the music of forever.